Nowadays, as always, people are anxious to obtain secrets and gain higher consciousness by shortcut methods. They hear of exercises and want to use them to get something done. This is so widespread, especially in the West, that anyone will try yoga. People think that they can gain spiritual insight through meditation alone, and so on. So this joke, understood as a parable of such people's foolishness, is not untimely. Lucky. An oil drilling millionaire went to a dentist who said, "Which tooth do you want me to deal with?" "Oh," said the tycoon, "drill away anywhere. I feel lucky today." By putting a situation into another context while retaining the structure, we can illustrate what is really happening. This is not so very different from, say, getting a child to attend to an arithmetical problem by speaking of apples and onions instead of 1s, 2s, and 3s. It is interesting to observe that this joke will be extremely valuable in teaching the illogicality and possible harmful results of adopting random exercises, and most mystical experiments are in fact random experimentation. The translation into apples and onions from 1s, 2s, and 3s has in such instances really worked. It is almost as absorbing, though not so heartening, to note that many people cannot learn from the joke, presumably having too much capital, as it were, tied up in their exercises. Another principle which observation supports is that, in all studies, as in most other aspects of life, people will tend to seek things which attract them, rather than what will suit them. Indeed, it can be supposed that there would be no vanity industries if this were not the case. The object of Sufi preparatory study, however, being to illustrate, expose, and outmaneuver superficial ambition, jokes have come into being to illustrate examples of this tendency in order to prevent it being employed in choosing teaching procedures. The principle may be enunciated as, people want what attracts them or will purport to give them what they think they need. Sufi teaching attempts to clarify this, and also to provide what they really need. This quip is illustrative. What he wants. A man went into a pharmacy and asked for hair restorer. "Certainly. A large or a small bottle?" "Oh, definitely a small one. I don't want very long hair." This factor is sometimes known as the slightly deaf one. The victim only partially registers what he wants or needs. This is illustrated by the woman whose daughter invited her to her wedding in some faraway country. The mother was delighted to hear that the girl was getting settled at last, and also, as she understood from a long-distance phone call, that it was to be such a suitable match. She sent her blessing and hurried to the spot. To be married. As soon as she got to the jungle clearing where the preparations for the marriage were warming up, she seemed rather distraught, however. "What's wrong, Mother? You told me you were delighted." "I did, but why didn't you speak up? I thought you said a rich doctor." People hear what they want to, imagine what they hope for. The Sufi saying has it, God to the bee is something which has two stings. Many of the reasons for people starting on spiritual or advanced psychological studies and then abandoning them are to be found in the single factor of the disparity between their expectations, based usually on conditioning or greed, and reality. They wanted certain experiences but were offered different ones. It is, of course, difficult to provide people with any version of a truth which they cannot yet perceive, in order to convince them that it is worth seeking, hence the vacuum into which all kinds of expectations rush. Some dervishes, themselves not teachers enough to realize this, have tried to instruct by analogy, only to find that the analogy itself is not suitable. The tale of the dervish who walked on water is employed to warn against this attempt. Why he did it. Since, by definition, you cannot pass on the incommunicable, a certain dervish cast about him for a way to convey, by demonstration, something of the wonders which he had experienced. Analogy is the answer, he said to himself, and put his mind to it. He learnt, after a great deal of trial and error, how to walk on water. Then he called all the local villagers together, headed by the mayor, and paced slowly across a lake. "What do you think of that?" he asked them as he arrived at the other side. "One thing puzzles me," said the mayor. "Why didn't you learn to swim, like everyone else?" Jokes either stay in the mind or can be recalled to provide usable frameworks for reminding one of this memory difficulty. One Nasruddin tale is used for this, and, characteristically economical, also deals with the problem itself. The tale of the shoes. Teachings often have to be explained or experienced many times before they become established, because of the competition of subjective ideas, the filter through which the teachings must go in the ordinary person, who cannot give full attention to them. Shoes. The mullah was up before a magistrate, accused of stealing a pair of shoes. "Nasruddin," said the judge, "the records show that you were accused of stealing a pair of shoes 5 years ago." "Yes," said the mullah, "and you just try making a pair of shoes last 5 years." One of the paradoxes I have noticed is that people who do not remember things that would be useful to them are generally those who are in too much of a hurry. Their very agitation and impatience slows down their progress in the end. People constantly write to say that they feel that they have so little time, or that they must do this or that urgently. If there ever was a case of, if that is your question, you will never be able to understand the answer, it is in this situation. But one can give a certain answer, again a joke, which has been observed to produce good results. Painting. The way in which to answer this while giving an analogy is to mention the man who was asked why he was painting at such a tremendous rate. His answer was, "There is so little paint left, I'm terrified that it will be finished before I have got this door covered." It has often been said that everyone has higher perceptions, but that effectively they have none, due to the barrier effect of the heedlessness, the Sufi technical term is ghaflat, which prevents understanding of something already, so to speak, known. One of the major causes of this heedlessness is not to take equal note of all the materials which one is offered. Accustomed to choosing what appeals to them, people do the same with Sufi instructional materials. The result can be summed up like this. Muscles. There was once a man who took a correspondence course in muscle building. When he had finished, he wrote to the firm which supplied it, saying, "Gentlemen, I have worked through the lessons. Please send me the muscles." And people too often mistake one thing for another. Having heard of miracles associated with religion, they believe things are miraculous when they are not, or try to find the miraculous rather than the truth. They won't listen to a source of knowledge, even, as the saying goes, when they are sitting up a tree with one. Perhaps the saying comes from this tale. The explanation. 3 explorers, a priest, a businessman, and a Sufi, whose other interests we do not know, were passing through a dangerous jungle. As the days went by, the number of hostile wild beasts who circled around them became larger and larger. Eventually, they had to take refuge in a tree. After a council of war, they decided that one of them should go for help, since if they stayed as they were, fear, hunger, and fatigue would eventually force them to fall into the jaws of the ravening beasts. But they could not decide who should go. "Not me," said the priest, "for I am a man of God, and I should stay to comfort whoever is left behind." "Not me," said the businessman, "because I am paying all the expenses of the trip." The Sufi said nothing, but suddenly pushed the priest off his branch. He fell to the ground, and immediately a fierce pack of hyenas picked him up, fought off all the other animals, and placed him reverently on the back of the largest of their number. Then, guarding him carefully, they escorted him towards safety. "A miracle!" cried the businessman. "And after your cruelty, divine guidance has intervened to save that good man, and I am, from this moment on, converted to a good and holy life." "Steady on," said the Sufi, "for there is, after all, another explanation." "What other explanation can there possibly be?" "Simply this, that it takes one to know one," said the Sufi, "and the smallest always recognize their leader and honor him." It is the inability to perceive truth because of self-deception for which there are distinct remedies, which causes people to accept teachings from teachers which are really no such thing. Pseudo-teachers, too, fall into the same trap, as is so thoroughly known in the East as to have produced this familiar story. Tasks and illumination. So-called spiritual teachers often do not know what they are doing. But, as they can hardly confide this to everyone, they are relieved when they can discuss the consequent difficulties with one another. Thus it happened one day that when two pseudo-masters of the mystical path met, one said to the other, after the customary exchange of compliments, "I have a disciple who constantly asks for tasks and illumination. Have you any idea what I might do with him?" The other illuminate replied, "It is interesting that you should say that. I have had a similar case myself. I had him drink a cup of kerosene." They parted, and after some months met again. The first mystic said, "I tried your idea on my disciple. He lit a match to have a cigarette, burst into flames, and was completely consumed." "That's right," said the other. "The same thing happened to mine." I was talking, not long ago, to one of the dancing dervishes who sometimes travel to the West to demonstrate the whirling movement originated by the great mystic Jalaluddin Rumi of Konya. I mentioned to him that Rumi had said that his practices were instituted for the temperament of the people of Asiatic Turkey, not for Europe and America. In accordance with Sufi practice, exercises are devised for specific time and people. Did he not think that it was rather unusual to export such things as this? He told me that since people in the West automatically associate music and movement with spiritual things, this was bound to arouse in them feelings which they considered to be spirituality, which was, surely, good enough for them. The bottle. It all depends, of course, what you are purporting to be doing, but this puts me in mind of a story about Mullah Nasruddin, when, camping for the night, he put a bottle down as a pillow. "Mullah," said a friend, "surely that is going to be too hard." "An ordinary bottle, yes," said Nasruddin, "but I'm going to stuff it with straw before I put my head on it." Humour is often used to help people remember that one is often so literal-minded, or so responsive to conditioned reflexes, that ritualism or slogans take the place of understanding or even action. This example, making use of the English idiom, illustrates what could happen on the social level if such thinking were to become prevalent in ordinary matters. The effect on spiritual matters is held to be analogous. Escape. A convict had escaped from the prison in a storm, and the governor was informed. He reacted immediately. "Send out the cats." "Surely, sir," said one of the warders, "you mean send out the dogs." "Certainly not. I wouldn't send a dog out on a night like this." People often imagine that if they do not get what they wanted exactly when they want it, they have wasted their time, or that someone else is to blame. They may think, too, that they are to blame when it is all a matter of the right time, right place, right people. You can keep this in your mind by an analogy, which is not supposed to be regarded as a sacred recital, but is scripted to show you the relative positions of timing and also of how people leave out of calculations things which alter circumstances. This is the story. A wager. A man once bought a parrot. When he got it home, he told it, "I'm going to teach you to talk." "Don't bother," answered the bird. "I can talk already." He was so amazed that he took it to a tea house. "Look, I've got a fantastic talking parrot here." But the parrot wouldn't talk, even though the man kept insisting that it could. People bet him 10 to 1 that it could not, and he lost the bet. Nothing would induce it to speak. On the way home, followed by the jeers of his friends, the man cuffed the parrot and said, "You fool! Look at the amount of money you lost me." "It is you who are the fool," said the parrot. "Take me back to that tea house tomorrow, and you'll get 100 to 1, and win." Time, place, and people, of course, is the message. Keeping this principle in the mind helps to make it operative. This, in turn, alerts one to the occasions when progress in higher awareness can really be made. Once this idea is firmly grasped and can be recalled, it can be attached with great effect to the next principle, which concerns background. One may be able to perceive something when the attunement of time, place, and people is arrived at, but unless one has also developed a sufficient understanding of ability to decode what the messages from beyond mean, this effort is wasted. We can invoke a tale here to allude to what happens when results are achieved with an unsuitable vessel. The meaning. Following more than 50 years of atheism, scientists in Russia began to be curious about what religion might be. A group of them took a book of holy quotations and decided to have it decoded by an analogical computer. They opened the book and took the first phrase they saw, typing it out onto the keyboard. The phrase was, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." They crowded around the printout as the words began to appear. As they read the message, their astonishment increased. "The vodka is ready, but the meat is devitalized." "No wonder religions used to mystify people," they muttered to one another. Then one of them had an idea. He tapped out the book's title, Unconsidered Trifles, onto the decoder. Out came the translation, Neglected Puddings. "You see," he shouted, "you have got the wrong book. This one is about the abuses of cookery." They are still seeking an authentic religious text. Sufi humour teaching often concerns itself with the need to have the right information and the right experiences in the right order. Some people who believe themselves to be sensitive to deeper perceptions often show themselves not even to have a share of them. Too much trouble. A man, so goes the ancient Western joke, went into a place which had a sign outside. Any kind of sandwich served. "I'll have an elephant sandwich," he said. "Sorry, sir," answered the waiter, "but we cannot cut up an elephant for only one sandwich." In the famous Elephant in the Dark story, of course, each person has grasped some part of the elephant. We could use this Western tale to emphasize that you cannot taste a scrap of higher consciousness, the elephant, even though you might be able to buy a scrap of something which you might think to be similar, say a cheese sandwich. The foregoing story is a useful test, too, of the existing awareness of students. Setting aside the fusty obsessional who hates such tales, the most usual reaction is that the waiter is being clever and has outwitted the cocky customer. Those whom we find to be more able than others to direct their attention, however, will often remark that the story also indicates that there is a useless tendency to draw ineffective conclusions from materials presented to one. Those who cannot see this immediately can usually do so after they have been exposed to this associated tale. The meaning. A certain professor was demonstrating, before fellow members of the learned academy of his country, a remarkable discovery. First, he took 3 flies out of a matchbox. Then he commanded them to fly 3 times around a table. Then, on his command, they jumped 5 times. Finally, they danced a silent tap dance on a table, their images magnified through a gigantic apparatus devised for the purpose of making such things visible to a large audience. The onlookers were spellbound. "And now," said the scholar, "I will give you the demonstration. It is the illustration of my discovery." He took the flies and placed drops of honey on their feet, sticking them to the table. Then he shouted, "Flies, jump!" The flies went on licking at the sticky stuff. And that, gentlemen, concluded the professor, demonstrates that flies, when their feet are covered in honey, cannot hear. Believe it or not, the 2 preceding stories are unfunny to people who are suffering from one of the characteristics which may link the professor and the sandwich bar customer: small-mindedness causing inability to understand. In ordinary life, this is usually seen in people trying to get more than they can out of a situation where they eventually lose. This is excellently portrayed by another Western, an American, joke about trying to get things on the cheap. Value. A man had just given a beautiful girl a ring set with a flashing stone as big as a walnut. The girl said, "Is this a real diamond?" "Well," said the man, "if it is not, I've been swindled out of $3. The opinionated nature of the pseudo-teachers who often pass for real ones, especially in the Far East, is a byword. Here is a story currently in use among legitimate gurus there, which never fails to confuse or annoy the sometimes very celebrated frauds. It always has to be tested, however, by being recited without any intimation that it is a joke. Written all over her. A certain rich American lady was visiting an Indian guru who accounted himself as the greatest of all. He had been told in advance that she was thinking of making a very large donation to his work. When the time came for the guru to appear at his darshan, reception time, he saw this visitor in the crowd which had come to pay respects. "Yes," he said to her at once. "Who is the greatest man in the world?" she asked. "Kornpone you," answered the guru, with hardly a moment's hesitation. Afterwards, his chief assistant asked him why he had given such a strange answer. "What secret wisdom is in this, O great master?" "Well," said the Mahatma, "I of course knew that the greatest man in the world is me, but when I saw from the inscription on her T-shirt that she respected someone else, I said to myself, business is business. After all, he's probably dead, so there's no harm in honouring him." Yet Sufis often answer people in a manner which they do not expect, and such answers do indeed cause difficulties. This is generally because the hearers are too full of themselves to profit from what has been said or done. One story helps to fix in the mind the need to observe the occasion and the content, and not to relate everything that happens to one's existing neuroses or preoccupations. Violence. One day a fox went up to a mouse and said, "I am the king of beasts." "Of course you are," said the frightened mouse. Then he saw a kitten. "Am I not the king of beasts?" he snarled. "Yes, certainly," said the frightened kitten. He caught a rabbit, and then a hen, and finally a mole. All agreed immediately that he was the king of the animals. Suddenly he ran across a lion, standing in a clearing. The fox ran up to him, crying that he was the king of all beasts. The lion said nothing, but he struck the fox a blow which dazed him and then roared in his ear, The fox got shakily to his feet and limped away. "Force is no answer to speech, you know," he said. "I have ruffled your feelings, and all you can do is get violent." Sufi schools have a glamour which attracts both the quite unsuitable and that part in many people which is not the side which should connect with the teaching. In reality, Sufi study is hard and unpredictable. People must learn what they need to know, not what they may think they want. The external appearance of things, which sometimes has included music and dancing, strange garb and regalia, importance in the community, the air of secrets and achievement, all these may have a place, but they do not constitute Sufi study, any more than the externals of anything are the same as the basis, the root, the reality, the work, which goes into producing the effect or the appearances. Not unnaturally, imitators and people who imagine Sufi things to be the externals alone organize ceremonies and initiations, gatherings and groups, studies and so on, including emotion-arousing so-called teachings, even books and recitals which have this attractive quality. Some people never find out that they have been, in fact, consumers of externals and vanities, not spiritual people at all.